Hello and welcome to CGTN special coverage of China's 10th National Memorial Day for the victims of the Nanjing Massacre on Zhongshi in Beijing. 86 years ago, Japanese troops invaded the city of Nanjing on December 13th. More than 300,000 Chinese civilians were killed in 6 weeks. In 2014, China's legislature designated December 13th as a date to remember and honor those killed in this horrific event in history. A ceremony will soon be held at the Memorial Hall for the victims of the Nanjing Massacre in East China's Jiangsu province. Commemorations will also take place across the country. Now, for a preview of today's events, let's go live to CGTN reporter Wu Bing at the Memorial Hall of the victims in the city of Nanjing. Wu Bing, once again, a solemn morning there in the city of Nanjing. Tell us more about the atmosphere today.
Zhongshi, this is the 10th National Memorial Day for the victims of Nanjing Massacre, and a ceremony will be held in the city of Nanjing where the Holocaust happened 86 years ago in just minutes. And as you can see behind me, China's national flag was raised earlier this morning and then lowered to half-mast. And around 8,000 representatives, they are here, they have stood here and ready to participate in the ceremony. So during the ceremony, the entire city of Nanjing will halt for 1 minute. Pedestrians will stand still and the cars will stop with sirens wailing across the sky to pay tribute to the victims. And during the ceremony, we are also expecting a senior Chinese official to address the ceremony, reiterating the importance of remembering the history and cherishing peace. Well, in 2014, just now you've introduced a little bit, China has officially designated the day, December 13th, as the National Memorial Day. It is on this day of 1937 that Japanese troops invaded the city and started one of the most barbaric episodes of World War II, killing 300,000 civilians and unarmed soldiers in about 6 weeks. And 10 years have passed, and the numbers of survivors have kept falling. Just this year, 12 survivors have passed away, leaving the number of registered survivors to just 38, and their average age is over 93. But despite this, some of the survivors have made it to the ceremony despite a very cold morning here in Nanjing, because they want to use their presence to tell the world we must not forget this part of history and cherish the hard-won peace that we have today. And I think given the current ongoing conflicts and deaths around the world, this message, the message of peace, actually means more to the modern world. 钟时。
It is extremely sad that we're losing some of these eyewitnesses every year, which makes today that much more important in the commemoration. CGTN's Wu Bing live in Nanjing for us today. Wu Bing, thank you. Extensive documents have shown that during the Japanese Army's 14-year occupation of China, it engaged in some of the worst crimes against humanity in history. The Nanjing Massacre was one of them.
In 1931, the Imperial Japanese Army invaded Manchuria in China's northeast and occupied vast swaths of land there. Some 45 million casualties were recorded. The Japanese war policy: plunder, kill, and burn. And that was given full play in December 1937, when it seized the eastern city of Nanjing, the then capital of the Republic of China. According to the Nanjing War Crimes Tribunal in 1947, more than 300,000 people were massacred over the course of 6 weeks. Over 200,000 women were raped, tortured, and killed. Many were forced into sex slavery. Dozens of mass graves have been discovered over the decades. In 1998, more than 60 years later, the remains of 208 people were recovered from a relatively small grave. In 2014, the Chinese government designated December 13th, the day Nanjing fell, as a National Memorial Day.
And for more insight, let's talk to Associate Professor Xia Lu with the School of Marxism Studies at Renmin University of China. Professor Xia, thank you so much for joining us on a day that hits right in the heart of so many Chinese people that remember this painful chapter of history In 2014, China designated December 13th as the National Memorial Day for Nanjing Massacre victims. Talk to us, Professor Xia, about the significance of having this day.
Yes, thank you very much for having me here. Yes, in 2014, December 13th, this day had been designated as the National Memorial Day for the Nanjing Massacre victim. Actually, before 2014, well, most of this kind of a memorial event or memorial, let's say, a gala, all these kind of events were local, original events, and also different social organizations and people, they also organize this kind of commemorating events to remember, to let all the Chinese people and the rest of the world not to forget about what happened 86 years ago, what happened more than 86 years ago, that the Imperial Japanese Army invaded and occupied most of Chinese land and made atrocities to the Chinese people and left all these kind of disasters to Chinese people. So this official designation of the National Memorial Day, well, I think is the one of the most important signal to the outside, to the rest of the world, that we are kind of cherishing the peace hard-won, and also we don't want, or Chinese people don't want any other kind of people to experience or endure this kind of disastrous memory. So I think the significance is not only for Chinese people, it's not only for to remember the past and not forget about the past, but also for the rest of the world and for the peace that hard won, and particularly in this moment. So I think the significance, particularly for this year, is very kind of timely.
Professor, it's a heart-wrenching event to think about, to reflect on, and whenever I think about the Nanjing Massacre, I feel like that I tremble, that I shake a little bit in my heart because of how painful it is. And for those who may not be familiar with the Nanjing Massacre, can you explain how bloody, how brutal that event was?
Yes. Yes, this is about history, and it's about historical memory. Well, actually, all Chinese people should not forget the humiliation and the disaster committed by the imperialist invaders in modern Chinese history. And among all these imperialist invaders, the imperialist Japan back then was one of the countries that had left atrocities, the heaviest atrocities to China and the Chinese people and Chinese society. Actually, as early as in 1931, the Japanese imperialist army already invaded northeastern China. And in 1937, the imperialist Japanese army launched the further invasion to the rest of China, the northern China, the central China, and even southern China. And on December 13, the very day of 1939, Japanese army attacked and occupied Nanjing, the then capital city of China, where they also committed a massacre. And this massacre, not only about military, those kind of surrendered military soldier, but also the civilian people. And this kind of massacre has caused a death toll of over 300,000 civilian and military people. And even worse thing is that right after 1945, right after the ending of the Second World War, the Japanese rightist politician, they always denied this kind of fact. They always denied this very fact and tried everything to distort this fact and to let they want the rest of the world to know that they have never done this kind of thing. But the fact is that they have done this kind of atrocity to Chinese people, to China, and this should not be forgotten.
For sure, it should not. Professor, official records suggest only 38 survivors of the Nanjing Massacre are still alive as of December 1st. Our reporter mentioned this just now, that we're losing some of them each year. Professor, I believe the commemoration is getting started as we speak now. We're losing some of them by the year. There will be a time when we no longer have living eyewitnesses to this massacre. By that time, we will need to have these historical evidence, books, research, documents to remember this massacre. Professor, I'm going to have to leave you there because the commemoration is now starting. You're looking at live pictures coming out of Nanjing in East China's Jiangsu province, where a commemoration is taking place to remember victims of the Nanjing Massacre. Families of some victims and survivors are attending the ceremony. We do know that thousands of people will sing the national anthem before observing a minute of silence. A senior official of the Communist Party of China will deliver a speech later on.
南京大屠杀死难者国家
Nanjing
公祭仪
Massacre
式
Victims National Memorial Day here begins.
奏唱中华
Now
人民
let's
共
sing
和国国歌。
the national anthem. To all the victims, let's observe a moment of silence. The end of the silence. To the victims of Nanjing Massacre, let's send our flower bouquets.
请中共中央政治局委员、
Now let's
全国
invite
人
the
大
political
常委
bureau
会
member,
副委员长李鸿忠
Vice
同志讲
Chairman
话。
Li Hongzhong to deliver the remark. Dear compatriots
朋友们，
and colleagues,
今天我们在这里
today
隆重集会，
we are gathering here
深切缅
solemnly
怀
to
南
memorize
京大屠杀
the
的
victims
无辜死难者，
of the Nanjing
缅
Massacre.
怀惨遭
We come
日本侵略者
to
杀戮的
memorize
死难同胞，
the dead
缅怀
by the Japanese
为中国人
invaders
民抗日战争胜利
and
献出
to
生命的
memorize the
革命
people
先
who
烈
sacrificed
和
their
民族
lives
英雄，
for the victory of
缅
our
怀
war against
同中国
Japanese
人民
aggression,
携手
and
抗击日本侵
to
略者
memorize
而献出
all
生
of
命的
those who
国
laid
际
down
战
their
士
lives
和国际
from the international community for the
表
peace
达
in
中国人
China.
民坚定不移走
The
和
Chinese
平发
people
展道路的
unremittingly follow the
崇高
path
愿
of
望
peaceful development,
宣誓
and
中国人民
we
牢
swore
记历史
that the Chinese people will always bear in
珍爱
mind
和平
history.
开创
We
未来
treasure
的
peace
坚定
and
立
try
场
to blaze a new future.
1937年12月13日
On December the 13th, 1937, the
野蛮
Japanese
侵入南京
invaders
制造了震惊中外的
occupied
南京
Nanjing
大屠杀惨案
and Nanjing
30
Massacre
万
broke
同胞
out. 300,000
杀戮
Chinese compatriots
无数妇女
were killed.
遭到
numberless
蹂躏
women
残害
Also
无数
suffered.
儿童死于非命
Children died.
1/3建筑遭到毁坏
1/3 of the
大量
architecture
财
were
物
destroyed,
遭到掠夺
and a large amount
在
of
人类文明
properties
史上留下
were
了
robbed.
极其黑暗的一页
That was a dark page of history.
这一公然违反国际法的法西斯暴行
That is
早有
a
历史
flagrant
评论
violation of
和法
international
律
law.
定论
As a
是任何
fascist
人任何势
behavior,
力
it is
都否认不了的
already cited as
反人类
such,
罪行
and no one can oppose such
为
a
了打
nature
败
of the
穷
Japanese
凶极恶的
behavior.
日本
It's
军国主义侵略者
anti-humane behavior.
中
And
国
to
共产党
conquer the
率先
Japanese
提出
invaders, the
抗日主
Communist
张
Party of China
倡导
proposed
建立
to fight
抗日民
against
族
it
统一战线，提
and
出和实施
established
持久战
such a
的
united
战略
front
总方针
to
和一整套人民
oppose
战争
against the
的战略战
Japanese
术，
invasion
支撑
with a
起
series of
中华民族
strategies and
救
tactics,
亡图存的
and
希
the
望，
Chinese people fought
成
for
为
the
全
national
民族抗
liberation.
战的中流砥柱。
And the Communist Party of China have become the
另外，
mainstay
中华儿女
of the war against
在
the
抗日民
Japanese
族统一战
aggression.
线旗帜下，众志
The
成
Chinese
城，
sons and daughters in
共
China
御
and
怪物
abroad
孕育
fought
出
with one
伟
mind
大
and one
抗战
heart
精神。
to
中国人
follow
民
the
经
great
过14
spirit
年艰苦卓绝的浴血奋战，
after
彻
years
底打
of
败了日本侵略者，
tremendous efforts, the Chinese
赢得
people
了中国人
won the
民
victory
抗日战
of the
争
war
伟
against
大胜
the
利，
Japanese aggression.
也为世界反法西斯战争胜利
And
做出
also,
了
we
重大贡献。
contributed to the great victory of the world
同胞们
anti-fascist
同志们
aggression.
朋友们，
Dear
经过不懈
compatriots
努
and
力
friends,
今日之中国
with unremitting
已经成为
efforts, today
充满生气
China
活力的
has
中国。
emerged as a vibrant
中华民
country,
族更
and the
加
Chinese
巍
nation
然屹立于世界民族之林。
is now growing
今
stronger
年
in the international
是全面
community.
贯彻党的20大精神的开局之年。
This year is the beginning year to implement the
我们按照
20th
党的
National
20大
Congress
战略
report.
部署，
According to
迈上
the
了
strategic
以中国式
arrangement of the
现代化
20th National
全面推进
Congress, we have
强国建
embarked
设
on
民
the
族复兴的
Chinese
新征程
modernization and national rejuvenation path.
奋进新征程。
And to
我们必须
strive
坚
on this
持
new pathway,
中国共
we
产
must be
党
committed
坚强领
to
导。
the leadership of the
历史充分
CPC.
证明，
History has
没有中国
testified
共
to the
产党，
full that without
就没
the
有新
leadership
中
of
国，
CPC, there would
就
be
没
no
有
PRC, and there would be no great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. The Communist Party of China, since its birth, have united and led people of all ethnicities in China to strive for a new Chinese nation. We have grown stronger, wealthier, and the Chinese Communist Party led the country, and that leadership is the focal point of the governance of the nation. We put our faith in the CPC, and we share the common destiny around the CPC. So we must rally around the leadership of the Central Committee of the CPC. The CPC coordinates all forces in the society. To strive for this new objective, we must champion patriotic spirit, and guided by the spirit of patriotism, we won the victory of the war against the Japanese aggression. It also inspired the Chinese sons and daughters to fight for a wealthier China and a stronger China. In the recent years, the descendants of the victims of Nanjing Massacre tell the stories of the ancestors who suffered but who strove for peace to the new generation. We must implement the patriotic education law and take it as a good opportunity to educate the socialist core values and to cement the concept of community of the Chinese nation so that the spirit could be carried on for generations to come. To embark on this new journey, we must also facilitate and expand the Chinese style of modernization. In contemporary China, once we were backward, we were bullied by others. That was a heart-tasting medicine. And the Chinese modernization is the one aspiration that we fought for generations. And we pursue the modernization based on our own national status quo, and we learn from international practices. We combine the historical tradition and modern civilization. It is the one way leading to the national rejuvenation, and it represents the direction of a future civilization. We must put our faith in it and keep deepening the Chinese style of modernization so that the destiny of China's progress is always in the hands of the Chinese people. To embark on this new journey, we must continue to build a community of shared future for mankind. The Chinese people will never forget how the international friends tried all their ways to protect the Chinese victims during the war. They lent their hands to us, and their descendants maintain such historical friendship with the Chinese people, contributing to building a community of shared future for mankind. This year marks the 10th anniversary of the concept of building a community of shared future for mankind as a whole, proposed by President Xi Jinping. And this concept has been materialized in practices with a lot of fruitful results. And also, this year marks the 45th anniversary of the signature of the Treaty of Peace and Friendship between China and Japan. And to echo the call of this new era, we must have a steady China-Japan relationship, thus contributing to the Asia-Pacific peace and prosperity. Dear compatriots and colleagues, dear friends, we will never forget history, and we learn from history. We must be aware of actively promoting national rejuvenation so that the historic tragedies will not be repeated. Let us rally closer around the CPC Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping as its core and fully understand the significance of the two determinations, cement our full awarenesses and confidences so as to deliver two safeguards. We must march toward a stronger China with the Chinese style of modernization and realize the national rejuvenation of the Chinese nation.
The
youngster representative from Nanjing will read the Declaration of Peace. Relentlessly, the Yangtze River passes the majestic city of Nanjing. Haplessly, a tragedy befell the ancient city on December the 13th, 1937. Recklessly, the Japanese invaders filled the Yangtze River with the blood of our people. Miserably, 300,000 of our brethren perished in the abyss in 6 weeks. Angrily, the plum trees blossomed to echo the outrage felt by all mankind. Deeply, we mourn the heavy blows on our civilization for 100 years. Regrettably, our weak nation languished from troubles domestic and foreign. Resolutely, we fought to liberate ourselves and build a prosperous nation. Definitely, the obstacles in the past only make us stronger in the future. Vigorously, our nation recovers from the shadows 86 years ago. Earnestly, our friends from China and abroad gather at the 2023 memorial ceremony. Solemnly, we remember our dead and write a new chapter for our living. Justly, we go about the reconstruction of a nation in prosperity and harmony. Peacefully, we endeavor to begin a new age of national rejuvenation. Fondly, we will remember the past to inspire our young for eternity. We will remember the past to inspire our young for eternity. We will remember the past to inspire our young for eternity.
A commemoration ceremony there in East China's Nanjing to remember victims of the Nanjing Massacre. It is a day of remembrance. It is a day of reflection. It is a day also to look forward into the future and to cherish the hard-won peace. That is why at the end of the ceremony you saw the Ode to Peace recited by young people of Nanjing. And for more on this day,
the ceremony for Nanjing Massacre victims is ended. Now please feel free to visit the exhibition of Nanjing Massacre.
A commemoration ceremony there in Nanjing to remember victims of the Nanjing Massacre. Let's talk about this with my guest, Xia Lu, Associate Professor at the School of Marxism Studies from Renmin University of China. Professor Xia, can you share with us your thoughts and your feelings this morning after watching that ceremony?
Yes, thank you, Zhongshi. And after watching the memorial event, on the live, actually, the first kind of feeling is it has been a solemn event. It has been a solemn kind of a situation for not only for the people at the spot, but also for all the people who are watching this live show. And also, I was deeply moved. I was deeply, particularly in a part of the Declaration of Peace recited by all the younger generations. They were with emotion, and they were committed to this kind of event. And also, the lyrics, all the words written by the author for the Oath of Peace or Declaration of Peace actually give me to, let's say, a way of thinking. The first of all, the first point is that we should remember history, but we should not always dwell on the past, because if we only dwell on the past, and the past would only become a burden to the current people. But if we can, transform the past to kind of a driving force, then we can move on. We can, let's say, work hard to cherish the hard-won peace, like we have mentioned, that we have discussed. And also, we should ask a question. We should always ask a question, why this kind of a tragedy, why this kind of a tragic always repeatedly happen in history of human civilization. Not to mention about ancient history, but also we are only talking about modern history. In the past 200 years, this kind of a tragedy, actually they repeat just for a couple of periods. So we should always ask why. We should remember history. We should put our emotion to this kind of event, but we should also put our rational thinking into this thing. We should ask why. We should deeply dig into the reason, the background of this kind of tragic. And I think that's the most important thing for this national memorial event.
Professor, that's a great point. By remembering this day, we're not just dwelling on history, we're not stuck in history, but we're trying to figure out why this happened and what we can do collectively as a human community to prevent similar things from happening in the future. Professor, I believe we only have time for one more question. Just before the ceremony got started, we were talking about the tragic loss of survivors every year. Only 38 survivors of the massacre are still alive as of December 1st. And there will be a point in the future where we no longer have any eyewitnesses, living eyewitnesses, whose accounts of what happened are absolutely critical in honoring the historical truths. By then, Professor, what do we have to honor this chapter of history? Do we have enough written records, documents, archives to remember and to prove what has happened?
Yes, this is a very good question, and this has been related to academic community scholars' efforts in acquiring and maintaining and discovering new historical documents and archives. Particularly, when we only have less than 40 survivors and descendants of these first survivors, we should do this kind of oral historical recording or oral history, because oral history has already become a very important way to let us know the vivid history of the past. We should kind of rely on the written document, but we should also rely on those kind of vivid, this oral history, because it can give us a bigger picture. And I think the most important thing for current to save the history, save that past of history, is to do the oral history, is to let all this kind of, the disastrous history, be remembered, be saved, and be, repeated, not only for, remembering the past, but also for the academic study to know why this kind of thing happened, not only in China, but also in those kind of third world country or less developed country back in early 20th century. Because, we always kind of argue this kind of thing. The most important thing for us is to remember the past, but not dwell on the past, but to know what happened in the past and to prevent, the similar thing from happening in the future. And because peace is the most important thing for development, and I think that would be the most important part for us. Yeah.
Exactly. Professor Xia, it's a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for making time for us on this very important day. And with that, we come to the end of our special coverage today. I'm Zhong Shi in Beijing. On behalf of the entire team here at the CGTN World Headquarters, thank you so much for your company. And news continues on CGTN.